Welcome back. This is Saujanya Shetty from Attitude Makeover show. In today's episode, I'm in conversation with Subodh Sankar. He's the co-founder of Atta Galatta, a bookstore and event space in Bangalore that's more than just a bookstore with books on the shelf, in his own words. Having taken the plunge into the passion economy after a corporate career, Subodh talks about the shift, fears, and new perspectives that comes with it. Atta Galatta has been successfully running for over 11 years, led by Subodh and his wife Lakshmi, a partnership that has its own nuances he interestingly talks about. A venture with a niche focus on Indian literature, we touch upon the nature of writing, the innate sense of Indian-ness among us, and evolving with the times in this increasingly digital world. All great change happens with an attitude makeover. In line with this, Subodh talks about his mindset that unexpectedly catapulted him into a world where his passion leads the way and his time is currency. Catch my conversation with Subodh for insightful takeaways about vision, mindset, and plan of action. I hope you like it. So much for joining me in the Attitude Makeover show. It's such a delight and pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Saujanya. I'm like I told you, I'm really excited. I'm happy that you've started this out, and I'm happy that I could be part of the conversations that you're having. So thank you.
I'm following your footsteps. I think you've been the most pivotal reason for seeding this thought of really stepping out of your comfort zone, doing something that you're passionate about. So I'm just following.
You're being very kind, but I'll accept the compliment.
You should. You've been pivotal in this decision. So let me start off with the name itself, right? Atta Galatta. I used to actually think it is Atta Galatta. As a Tulu-speaking person, Atta is the attic. And a lot happens in the attic in Bangalore as a child. So I thought that's the beautiful name. But it's Atta Galatta. So tell me, what's the whole origin of it, the origin of Subodh's journey towards Atta Galatta?
Sure.
Galatta.
I think Atta and Atta mean the same thing in both Tulu and Kannada, right?
Yes.
And we've had a lot of people ask us if we were Atta Galatta, and of course a lot of people ask us what is Atta Galatta. So the word Atta Galatta comes from Atta and Kannada, which is play, right?
Yeah.
So when Lakshmi and I sort of 11 years ago decided to start a bookstore, we were obviously searching for a name for it, and we wanted something that would stand for the ethos of what the place was.
Mm-hmm.
And so two things about Atta Galatta, right? One is, as a bookstore, we're an Indian language bookstore. We basically carry books in various Indian languages, English included. And so we wanted something that kind of captured that ethos. And also a name that suggested that it was not just a bookstore, right? I mean, bookstores can be fun. It doesn't have to be this old place where, you have books arranged on a shelf and all over the floor. So the thinking of a place that is fun, and then the word Atta came to play in. And in Galatta, if you sort of look at the nicer aspects of Galatta, not necessarily, somebody throwing stones at your car, and you look at Galatta from that other perspective. So kind of rhymed, and we said, Atta Galatta. So it's a kind of a place that stands for fun and a little rambunctious, activity.
And it still lives by that, isn't it?
It surely does. Yes,
it
absolutely does.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I want to go back more into that. So most of us who are from the corporate world, you will, when you start talking on a more personal front, you sort of hear these stories of ideally, when I retire, I want to be on a mountain top with a cafe, or by the sea or by the lake with a cafe and a book and things like that. You sort of took that plunge from an entrepreneurial life and a corporate world to this. Walk me through, the purpose. How did you figure out this is what you want to do? And taking that plunge is not an easy thing. Like, I can tell you, just me as an example, I've tried that a couple of times, and it's not an easy thing.
No, I agree. We've been fortunate, right? To start with, I think we've been fortunate.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate that Lakshmi and I have been able to do something that we wanted to do something that we love to do. And to start with, I think there's been a large dose of good fortune on top of everything else. So 10 years ago, I think, we've shared a past life, right? Where,
Club July.
and then afterwards I went ahead and did another tech startup. And frankly, at about, it was about 2010, about 11 years ago, when I was getting a little disillusioned with this whole world of startup technology and the pace and what it was taking out of my life, right? You recall I used to be in a traveling sales job where I would be, out of the country 15 to 20 days in a month. I wasn't seeing my child grow up.
Yeah.
There were aspects of life that you were missing on. And frankly, the idea for Atta Galatta has been in Lakshmi's head for a very long time. Okay, I'm not going to take the credit. It was her idea. She is a student of literature. She's among the most well-read people that I've ever met. She takes the term voracious reader to another level. And like most other people who are sort of book lovers, she's always talked about owning a little tiny bookstore. So her thing was, we have to start this bookstore where you and I can grow old together. I don't care if people come, but at least you and I can sit in a bookstore surrounded by books, surrounded by the 5 people that we love, and grow old together, right? Have a couple of cats, have a couple of dogs. Unfortunately, the cat part didn't work out. But yeah, have a couple of cats, have a couple of dogs, and let's grow old together. So in 2010, I basically exited the last tech startup that I was working on. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to play golf. Maybe I can become really good at playing golf. And she's like, don't waste your time. I've always wanted to open this bookstore. Let's go ahead and do that now.
Interesting.
So, so it was Lakshmi's idea. She basically gave me that little kick on my behind to say, you know what, let's go ahead and do that. And frankly, that's how the idea turned into something that we really pursued. So in 2010, we decided that we were going to start this bookstore. And that was a time when MG Road was going through its makeover with the metro and things like that. So bookstores were starting to close left, right, and center.
Yeah.
And people thought we were crazy. They were like, you know what, bookstores are shutting down and you guys are saying you're going to start a bookstore. And on top of that, we said, we're not going to be just another bookstore, right? We're going to be a bookstore that focuses on Indian writing. So I think for a long time, I've read Indian writing, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. I've always read Indian writing. And Lakshmi would read everything. She'd read world literature. She'd read everything. But she also had a particular affinity towards Tamil literature. She reads extensively in Tamil. And, every time we had to go and get a new stash of books, we'd do it when we were visiting my parents back home in Coimbatore, or if Lakshmi was visiting her grandfather back home in Chennai, we'd then just go to one of those stores and pick up like a carton full of books, right? Because there weren't enough Tamil books being sold in Bangalore.
Yeah.
And then you start talking to your friends and people said they, shared similar experiences. If they had to buy, for example, Hindi books, they'd either get it from their travels back home to the north, or if they wanted Malayalam books, they'd get it from their travels back home to Kerala. And then we realized that people were reading.
Yeah.
People were reading a lot in their mother tongues. And also people my age and people our age, right, were making sure that their children did not lose touch with that vernacular, right? Because unfortunately, as sort of urban city dwellers in Bangalore, we end up speaking to our children in English. Our
Yeah.
children end up speaking to us in English. They maybe speak to their grandparents in their mother tongue, but they answer back in, so,
Yeah.
and that whole movement of, I'm going to make sure that my child doesn't miss out on that whole sort of mother tongue experience is a very real thing that's happening in a city like Bangalore. And so we said, let's start Atta Galatta as a bookstore that serves that niche. Let's focus on selling Indian writing in its various forms, flavors, languages in Atta Galatta. So when we started, they were like, boss, not only are you starting a bookstore when bookstores are closing down, you're saying you're going to sell Tamil and Bengali and Malayalam and Kannada and, regional language books. Who's going to come to your bookstore?
Yeah.
So, but then I think we had our sort of head kind of screwed on in one particular direction, and we were like, you know what, we're going to open the bookstore. Doesn't matter if nobody comes. We'll read all the books there, have a couple of cats, have a couple of dogs, and we'll, grow old together. That's basically how we started Atta Galatta.
So that was the North Star. That was like...
Yeah, I think maybe
it's the personal,
it is the personal,
choice,
right? It's that personal choice. Sometimes I think in our case, that personal choice of saying, you know what, I know this is what I am missing, and I know that a lot of the people that we know are also missing that kind of an experience, and that was clearly sort of the final push that helped us sort of get started.
So I remember reading this blog from Sundar Pichai, where he says all of us have these 5 balls. We become equal there suddenly.
Correct.
So we have 5 balls. One is health, then there is your soul, there's family, there's friends, and then there's work. So if you really look at, and oftentimes when it's work, when you have your ups and downs, work is like a rubber ball. But the other 4 are like very flimsy, you need to handle them with care. It's like a glass ball. So when it breaks, when it falls, it gets scattered, it gets, bruised. And so it never goes back to its original form. You were one of those few I know for like last 15 years who got this right in the beginning in life as a priority.
No. I don't think so. I don't think I did. I think you're absolutely right. Of course, Sundar Pichai is talking about this from an absolutely right perspective. And not only are we've got these 5 balls, right? We're juggling these 5 balls.
Yes.
We're juggling these 5 balls, and we know 4 of them are very fragile. We know one's got the most resilience and more control over us, which is that work ball. It's not only made of rubber, it's made of sort of indestructible rubber, right?
Yes.
And no, I don't think I got it right. I don't think anybody gets it right. I think we all go through that phase of our life when we think, you can juggle those 5 balls. You can juggle those 5 balls successfully. And you always end up juggling that rubber ball better than everything else, right? No, I don't think I got it right. I don't think I might have even got it right now. But you get better.
Yeah.
You get better. And sometimes, you start seeing that one of those other balls is actually made out of something far more valuable.
Yeah.
And in my case, I think it was, like I said, it was not even like, I used the word disillusionment earlier. It was not even disillusionment, right? I was happy doing what I was doing. I think I was reasonably successful in doing what I was doing. But there comes a point when you're saying, you know what? Yeah, maybe this is not as fulfilling as it ought to be, right? And, you don't know. I mean, it's not like, I can't put a finger on what exactly is that trigger, but at some point in time, it just feels like, you're at the right place to maybe do something, maybe do something slightly different.
Yeah.
And it's I think different for different people, and sometimes it just feels right.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, okay, fine, it just feels right.
So tell me one thing. I want to go back to our earlier conversation about language. I remember when I got married to Shamir, my mom-in-law and dad-in-law spoke English, so it was not so difficult. And mummy used to read a lot. I met her in the library. Back then, as kids, we used to have these mobile libraries, right? So I used to meet her there. But then when I went to Kerala, his grandfather used to live in this pre-British era, right? The British era, the independence journey, and amazing storyteller. So as kids, we've grown from listening to stories from our grandparents, which has the culture, it's a perspective-led story. And then we shifted to more text-based, which is our books. And I was talking to you before this, my books that I read were not so Indian in nature. They were more the international or the Western thing. So we've all grown up in some ways, unless you've had a fortune of, having parents both reading Indian writers.
Or you yourself read it.
Exactly.
Correct?
You're exposed to that. And somewhere, you evolve now. If you look at my child, that whole habit of reading is sort of diminishing to another medium itself, which is more the digital face of it, right? And there's enough and beautiful YouTube content. There is, illustrations and graphics and, novels around that. What's your perspective in this whole thing? Are we sort of holding on to something, or no, there is still a future for this with books?
I don't think we're holding on, right? I think we're just evolving with the times. So I'm probably slightly older than you are. And you're right. I mean, but we grew up in probably very, very similar environments. We grew up to parents who were themselves educated.
Yeah.
And therefore, they were probably the first generation of people that conversed, even in a marriage, with each other in a mixture of their mother tongue and English, right? Like you said, your parents probably spoke to each other in a mixture of English and Tulu.
Yeah.
My parents spoke to each other in a mixture of English and Tamil.
Yeah.
And they were fluently bilingual in both, in every aspect, right? They were fluently bilingual, reading, writing, and speaking.
True.
And, our parents' generation probably was the first generation of Indians that did that.
Yeah.
In our grandparents' generation, it was probably a little, it was a little rarer to find, peoples like that, people like that. Our generation, we've become completely urban.
Yeah.
And we've stopped being completely bilingual.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I can speak Tamil fluently. I cannot read Tamil as fluently as I'd like to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I can speak and understand.
Yeah.
But reading's become a chore.
Yeah.
Right? So I think, sorry for the digression, but I think when we grew up in such privileged environments, I think we were also kind of moved along a path where we were given multiple opportunities, right? We had the opportunity to read in English because our parents gave us that opportunity. And back then, reading in English meant that you read something that was published outside of India.
Yeah.
Because publishing in India probably did not start becoming something that was meaningful till maybe even the early 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Until then, publishing in India was very, very small. There just weren't enough titles. Though the publishers had presence in India, it was more to just import what was published overseas. And I think it was we were in a sense sort of products of our circumstance.
Yeah.
Right? But now when you look at and we were products of our circumstance in multiple ways. One, because the content that was coming was basically being imported. That was the circumstance that was prevailing at that time. It's not like you had television or the internet or other forms of content that were coming. So we basically stuck to what was available to us. Today's children are just more fortunate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They have content that comes on their television. They have content that comes on their devices. They have content that comes as books.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly right. I mean, it's perfectly fine. And to add to that, now you have the choice. The world's become a smaller place.
Yeah.
You have a choice of accessing content that's made in India. You have choices of content that's made overseas. I remember for us growing up, I don't know how it was for you, but we used to have this big Indo-Soviet bookstore
Oh.
in Coimbatore. And so in addition to reading all this Western literature, right? You're reading your Enid Blytons and your Famous Fives and Hardy Boys and, everything that boys read, right?
I read Jackie Collins as well.
No, that's a little later. I'm talking about, maybe at 9 and 10 and things like that. We used to have this big Indo-Soviet bookstore.
Yeah.
And that used to be a big deal where India imported tons of books from the Soviet republics.
Interesting.
And they were all very nicely published, very inexpensive books. And they had a whole range of folk stories.
Wow.
Which were Russian. So I remember reading all of those. Wow. In fact, growing up, we were such a voracious readers, we used to read the telephone directory.
Yeah, I used to do that too.
Anybody who read, you read the telephone directory.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You read anything and everything because that was the only one choice you had if you didn't want to go out and play.
Yeah.
Kids are doing the same thing now and it doesn't make a difference. I think it's the same thing. You're consuming content.
It's an evolving process.
It's an evolving process. And I think meaningful content, no matter which form it comes in, I think shapes a child's mind, right? So these guys are just fortunate. So there is hope for books. I don't think books are going to go away because what is a book in the end? It's content published a certain way in the form of a story. I don't think books are ever going to go away.
This is like when I was working in HP, I used to work with printers, right? At some point there was this whole urgency around environment and, printing is going to die. But I feel printing is never going to die. It's just how and what gets printed is going to evolve. So it's an analogy we can put
Absolutely.
Well.
Absolutely.
Makes sense.
Absolutely.
So I want to dive deeper into the writing itself.
Sure.
We've had this conversation outside on, if you actually look at India's content, whether it is movies or music, classical, Hindustani, or even, the genres that are evolving right now, there's an Indian-ness to it. There's
Absolutely.
a very deep Indian-ness to it. And naivety over here, I haven't read so many Indian authors other than probably Guha, Arundhati Roy, or Vikram Seth and the likes of them. Is there an Indian-ness to the writing? And here's my perspective. If you actually look at any writing, you and I might choose to write on a same topic. Like, there would be, like, for example, podcasters, right? We might choose to have the same
conversations
topic. But then it is your persona, your personalization, your context and your aspects of, how you look at it that makes the difference. So from an Indian writer's perspective, is there an Indian-ness to the writers? What have you observed in the writer's journey?
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. Because I think when a content creator, and in this case, let's take the example of a writer, puts something down on paper, right? They are in a sense drawing from their deep sort of cultural experiences. So the language, the English language itself, in a way has become Indian. We have our own Indian version of English and the way we speak and the way you construct sentences and the way you choose to communicate using the language, I think there's a certain innate sense of Indianness even in the way you and I are speaking to each other in English.
True. I call it the biryanization, if I can call it that, of the language, right? Every region has a biryani and
you, me, everybody we know, people who are going to listen to this broadcast are going to perfectly understand what a biryanization of English is.
Yeah.
We've basically sort of taken that language, made it our own.
Yeah.
And on top of that, when you're creating with this language, you're drawing deep into your own sort of upbringing, the cultural context that you've grown up with, and I think that finds its way eventually into what you make,
True,
right?
True.
So take a look at this, right? I mean, just if you go back and look at Indian writing in English, you have a genre called mythological fiction.
Yes.
Which is so hugely popular.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't get more Indian than that.
Yeah.
right? Where you're basically going back to the stories that you've heard, the stories that you've grown up with, that your grandparents have told you, that you've seen, in the pictures of the gods and goddesses that you might have on your walls. Those are the stories that people then choose to retell.
Yeah.
In a fictionalized manner.
Yeah.
And if you look at mythological fiction, that's probably one of the biggest genres of Indian writing in English there is today.
Yeah.
Or, you could go and look at historical fiction, where people take historical facts, geography,
Yeah.
Cultural context, and spin a world of fiction.
Yeah.
Which is based on historical context, which is very, very deeply ours.
Yeah.
So, when you create a mythological fiction based on, Shivaji Maharaj's time, and you say, I'm going to sit down and dream and write up about a plot that happened in the times of Shivaji Maharaj.
Yeah.
What you're drawing into is your deep cultural context.
Yeah.
It might be a complete work of fiction. Or if you look at, one of the writers you mentioned, in Arundhati Roy, she sets her stories deep in her home state of Kerala, and that cultural context comes in. So what we've done is we've taken the language, we've taken the storytelling techniques that probably we've learned from the West, and we've made it our own. And so that obviously comes through in the kind of...
So we're basically taking the best of both worlds. On one side, we're looking at the progressive use of technology and platforms and things like that. On the other side, it is our innate, inborn characteristics and blending the two together.
Absolutely.
So as a writer, you've talked to a lot of writers in your 15 years. As a writer, I remember reading about, I think, Stephen King. He basically locks himself, disconnects from the outside world, no internet. And I think I don't know if it's him or someone else, they basically use a typewriter to write their story. What's the journey as a writer that one would go through?
I'm not the right person to answer that, because I think I don't write. I've just been fortunate by virtue of what we've been doing to have met a lot of writers and, had conversations with them. And I think they all go through their own process. But I think what everyone believes in and everyone preaches is that writing involves a certain level of rigor. So if you've chosen writing as something that you do, as your process, you might do multiple different things that differentiate your process from the others. But the common thing everyone does is they write every day.
Yeah.
Simple.
I have a friend who's written this book, 5 Morsels of Love. And Archana, I don't know if you know her.
We've met her at Atta Galatta. So she did a book launch there.
4 years back, I think, I used to tell her, eventually I want to do this podcast series. She used to say, write one line every day. Just write one line every day. And I cannot tell you how this resonates with me, because, it's that first plunge is a very difficult
It is
one.
a very difficult plunge, yes.
Yeah.
But that's what they all say, right? I mean, and then you look at it and then you say, yeah, obviously, anything you do with a certain level of rigor. I mean, when you went to Microsoft, you put on that dress in the morning and you worked yourself into a mind space that was ready for, going out and selling Microsoft.
Yeah.
And as a writer, I'm sure they do the same thing. They put on their, thinking cap and get ready to do that day as a writer. In fact, recently I just finished a book and I was also listening to a podcast with that writer. And, what he says is he wakes up early at 6:30, makes himself a cup of tea, and till 9 o'clock, he writes. All he does from 6:30 to 9 is he writes. He's either writing his book or he's making notes for what might be his next book. But whether there is a book currently underway or he's planning for it, 6:30 to 9 he writes. He just writes.
Interesting. And I want to go further into this, Subodh. if you look at the music space, we've gotten in some ways rid of our middlemen, right? Like Spotify has like sort of created a platform for creators to just upload content over there. We were just talking about Harper and Penguin and all these guys coming into India and bringing the books from outside to India. And now there are more authors from India. Actually, in the corporate world, everybody seems to be writing a book now. There are so
Indian
many
publishing
writers.
is going through a golden age.
Right.
Golden age.
So is there an era where we get rid of these middlemen and sort of really have a platform for writers to actually be out there to connect with the right audience, or how is that evolving?
It's happened. So self-publishing today is become very, very mainstream. And I don't like the word middleman there, right? Because I think whether it was in the world of music or whether it's in the world of publishing, there is a role that somebody like that actually plays. And that's not contrary to the democratization of the process in itself. So I'm not going to talk about music, but when I talk about writing, today an author has the opportunity to self-publish. And there are well-established platforms led by people like Amazon. Amazon's got a fantastic self-publishing platform. You can go, put your manuscript into that platform, and voila, it's available on Kindle.
Interesting. Okay.
Penguin's got their own platform to do that. So it's not like these platforms don't exist. And it's not like these platforms have been created to eliminate the middleman. Because if you take the world of publishing, I think most authors will unanimously agree that when you finish writing your manuscript, you're probably only 50% of the way done. Because then you go through this beast of a process called editing.
Yeah.
Right? And editing is something which is a combination of an art and a science.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Now, what these publishers offer you is editing that comes from a world of experience. Right? So it's like, going back to the very commonly used example of taking a rough diamond and polishing it into a very shiny stone. Editors do that for you. Now, that is where the value of these publishers exist. And which is why I, said that the use of the word middleman is not necessarily the right way to look at these people.
Makes sense.
Because they're not necessarily doing this to block content from coming out. But it is just that, in that particular process, they might not have enough bandwidth to polish everything that comes through the pipeline. And that same thing holds for a world of music as well. Right? I mean, I've had the fortune of meeting one or two music producers in my life. Take Simon Cowell, for example, right? He's a music producer. He's not a musician.
Yeah.
But the man knows how to pick talent, how to polish it, and create a product that is well put together. Now, you can choose to go through that process. You can choose not to go through the process. Both paths are available to you, and that is available in the world of publishing as well. But yeah, I don't like the word middleman because the middleman word today has sort of a not so nice connotation
to it. Yeah.
And that's not what the publishers are doing.
But
they're not there to block you from producing your content.
So tell me one thing. In the earlier days, again, from my reading, what I gathered was your publishing house has a huge role to play on how the story pans out, like how the book comes together. I remember, I forget the particular author who I had read, where the original, I think it was To Kill a Mockingbird, where the original storyline was very different, and then the editor had a perspective and the storyline sort of changed. Does that still happen?
Definitely does. I think writers and editors form very, very strong bonds. They work in a lot of cases. Maybe not for your first book, But as you go through your process of becoming a much published writer, you'll find that most writers have very, very strong bonds with their editor. Because I think that teamwork is a very, very strong and essential part of the development of that final product. And I'd say a lot of the writers that I've had conversation with, and I know a lot of editors also from the industry, have very strong sort of working relationships with each other. And it's true. I think in a lot of cases, the final published manuscript might be in more ways than one influenced by how an editor and writer go through that process of editing. And then
it's a partnership.
It's a huge partnership, and it's a very important partnership.
Taking a quick break from our conversation today, I wanted to quickly talk about our collaboration partner, Hubhopper. This podcast was created on Hubhopper Studio. If you wish to start your own podcast for free, please visit www.hubhopperstudio.com. Hubhopper is India's leading podcast creation platform. Start your podcast with Hubhopper Studio and get your voice heard across platforms like Spotify, Gaana, Google Podcasts, Wink Music, and many more. Click on the link in the episode description or visit hubhopperstudio.com. Thank you, Hubhopper, for the collaboration. And now we go back to our conversation. As kids these days, if you actually look, I'm switching gear again, okay?
Sure.
You have like White Hat Junior. Like my little one goes into those classes where you write code, right? In some ways, I believe as parents, we've looked at it as an economy of sorts. And we sort of, getting our kids ready for something like that. I would think a more all-rounded child would be one who's also got into the habit of writing, storytelling, and the creative aspect. But yet that as a platform like White Hat Junior is not that prevalent. Or is it there and we've just not made it mainstream?
Well, you're absolutely right. I think as parents, we've become so outcome driven.
Yes.
That we want everything that our children do also to be outcome driven. And I think that kills the beauty of childhood in certain ways.
Oh, I cannot agree with you more.
Because I think children, especially younger children, actually go on this voyage of discovery.
Yeah.
And in doing so, they try many, many different things. And they experience many, many different things that define them.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's it's I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it's become a very desi thing also, right? Yeah. Sometimes we are too focused on outcomes to realize that the journey is the most pleasurable part of life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we are in ways sort of extinguishing a very critical part of our children's childhood.
Yeah.
In forcing them to go after activities that have outcomes.
Yeah.
Rather than, discovering themselves by trying and failing and,
Yeah.
stumbling and doing all of that.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad. It's very sad.
Yeah. I remember.
I'm sorry. It's just very sad.
No, I remember telling my Adya that, at least let me put you in sports, because sports sort of, again, goes through that journey of their ups and downs.
But you know what happens? Most parents take their children to a football academy, right? And in their minds, they're like, yeah, my kid's going to go play for India.
Messi or something like that, yeah.
At least play for India, right? You put a child in cricket and you're like, maybe IPL.
Yeah.
So I think we've become such a outcome-driven society, and we're sort of foisting that on our children and taking away some of the pleasures of childhood from them, and that's sad.
Yeah. It sometimes bothers me a lot. Actually, not sometimes. Especially when you're a parent, you start looking at things a little differently. You know, what you take for granted, and
Yeah, it's sad.
yeah.
It's sad.
All right, I'm gonna switch gear again. You've gone through this journey of corporate life and then this life, right? We sort of abruptly ended that conversation. I want to bring that back. For someone like me who's taking a plunge into really relooking at what work definition is and really prioritizing the other four balls we talked about, is the picture really rosy on the other side? What is it like? What are some things like, there's a fear of failure. There's a fear of taking that risk. How does one go through that journey?
So, I mean, and again, just to go back to the conversation we had earlier, right? I think there's a fear of failure in everything that we do. Correct? And we're always thinking about what if this fails, right? My take on that is, how will you know if it's going to work unless you do it? Right? I mean,
but I could do it while I'm there in the other role as well, right? While I'm working somewhere else. How do you let go of that completely and take this plunge? What are some things that one has to take?
I don't know if there's a checklist or a formula to do things, right? I think most people that end up doing something with their careers, and it could be either at work. I mean, remember the conversation we had where you went in and started doing sales at Microsoft.
Yeah.
You didn't come from a sales background. You didn't come from a sales background. Yes, you might have had the reassurance that, you know what, I come from a world of AI to selling enterprise software.
Yeah.
Very different worlds. You pivoted.
Yeah.
Maybe you had the comfort of saying that, you know what, yeah, I'll still take home a salary.
Yeah.
But you've had to reinvent yourself from, thinking about AI to selling enterprise software.
Yeah. Which is a different ballgame.
It's completely different. I mean, it's as different as going from a corporate career to a bookstore.
Yeah, it is.
And you did that. But when you do it within, the construct of a corporate and being an employee in a corporate, it doesn't feel so scary, does it?
Yeah.
And this might be true for more people. And if you start looking at things that way, and if I go back and ask you, how did you do that? What was the trigger? You can't really go and put it down and say, these were the 4 triggers that I went through. These were the 5 sort of checks and balances that I had in place. You don't do that. I think as humans, we're always driven to adventure in different ways. Right?
Yeah.
And if it's within the construct of a corporate career, then that adventure feels less risky.
Yeah.
You could have failed. You could have been a miserable failure in sales.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You didn't think of it that way.
Yeah.
You're saying, yeah, you know what? I have Microsoft. They have a support team. They will train me. They will give me some skills. I have certain skills that I have built over my career so far. And I'm going to combine all of that to go and try and make sure that, at least give it a good shot.
Yeah.
And I think, you go through the same thing. Maybe, fears like, oh, what if I don't make enough money and things like that will not be answered. Unlike, if you're doing it within the corporate environment.
Yeah.
But,
That's the adventure.
It's the adventure.
Yeah.
It's the adventure. And, for me, like I told you, I was fortunate. Lakshmi and I were fortunate. It just so happened that we'd finished paying off the EMIs of our house at that point in time. So, we're like, yeah, I don't need that much money to live, right? Yeah, we went through that. I don't need that much money to live. I know this bookstore's not going to give me the same take home at the end of the month that my corporate career did.
Yeah.
But you didn't need that much.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's all about going through that process of sort of weighing pros and cons of the adventure. And I think, it's very difficult to say, okay, these are the 4 checkpoints and these are the things that I'd go through. I think as humans, we're all driven to adventure in one way or the other.
Yeah.
And sometimes why we do it is, people go and jump off a bridge with a bungee cord. Why would you do that?
The thrill of it, the experience.
Yeah, you didn't go through a list of checklists. Okay, most people have done it and they haven't died, so I'll do it, right? And I think that quest for adventure is what most of life's journeys sort of begin with.
Yeah. In poker, they also talk about this thing of the concept of folding, right?
When you're saying, you know what?
These cards are not for me. These cards are not the best cards. Because then it's an investment. And then the more you invest, the more there's failure through that. The shattering of your own self-esteem, self-confidence becomes a lot more. Is that the fear?
And I think that's the fear no matter what you do, right? It's the fear no matter what you do. I think when you get married to someone, you go through those fears. When you have a child, you go through those fears. When you change your career and go from one corporate to the other, you go through those fears.
And yet we put so much emphasis on this fear.
And we put, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Like it's something very different.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not really. When you're driving a car on the highway for the same time, for the first time, it's the same fear. When you go on an adventure holiday and you're climbing a peak, it's the same fear.
Yeah.
When you're doing your whatever adventure and going into the deep sea diving, is the same fear. When I try to swim for the first time, it's the same fear. I think it's the same thing. Everything is an adventure.
Yeah.
And it's just that sometimes I don't know. I think when the outcomes are defined by others, it just feels a little more reassuring than when you're in charge of defining the outcomes.
Yeah. Is that a more Indian thing, Subodh?
I don't think so. I think it's a very human thing. I think it's a very human thing.
The reason I ask if this is an Indian thing, when you're working in the corporate world as well, right? There's this notional thing that we are more followers of instructions or guidelines.
Because your outcomes are defined. Your outcomes are defined by someone else, right? So it just feels like that goal seems a little more
take control.
Controlled. It seems like you can actually see it. Yeah. You're like, okay, I see what is that, and I can maybe find my way to it. Whereas when you're on your own, you have to define those outcomes for yourself first, and you're saying, okay, fine, maybe it's.
So did you sort of build a lean canvas, a business canvas for Atta Galatta at some point? Or this was like, let me just go take the plunge.
This was a place where Lakshmi and I wanted to grow old together. Okay, how do you put that on a canvas? There was no canvas. No, nothing that specific or nothing that particular. What we knew was, okay, this is not a quote unquote business. We're doing this because we both deeply loved doing that, and therefore we wanted to do things that would encourage others who had similar passion to maybe be part of that community.
Yeah.
And I think we've survived for 11 years because we realized we're not alone.
Yeah.
Even in a city like Bangalore, there are literally thousands and tens of thousands of people who share that, those desires, who like that. And, it's been because those people have come and supported us and been part of our journey that we've also been around for 11 years.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about was about partnership. Like Lakshmi and you.
We've been married 23 years.
Oh, 23 years.
Yeah.
We just finished our 21. It feels old, but then I think the whole concept of monogamy, marriage, and this partnership is sort of like dwindling in some ways, if I can call it that. And they're very rare species like us, I think. I don't know. This is probably in my head.
We can give ourselves credit.
But it's a lot of, it's a journey, isn't it? It is like how you said, taking the plunge, really figuring it out together, where communication and really becomes at the core of it really important. Walk me through your journey. what roles are you both playing, and has that changed over the years? Have you all swapped roles, and how have you all handled failures, ups and downs in this journey through this?
So, Lakshmi and I had an arranged marriage.
Oh.
Yeah. Lakshmi and I had an arranged marriage, right? Now, very old-fashioned in that sense. We had an arranged marriage. And we maybe knew each other for about 4 months before we got married.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we knew each other for 5 months before we got married. I used to live in Coimbatore at that time. She lived in Chennai. So it's not like we met each other all that often. I'd go to Chennai whenever I could find an excuse and go and spend, a couple of hours with her. And so it was literally sort of after we got married that we got to know each other. And we discovered that we were complete and entire opposites of each other. Right? I mean, you know it a little bit, but it's only when you start
living together.
Yeah, it's only when you start living together and, the wedding is over and the marriage starts that you kind of, discover the sort of nuances and intricacies of your individual and collective behavior, right?
True.
So, yeah, we are complete opposites. I am very outgoing. I love having conversations and meeting people. But I'm also very shallow with people relationships. I have very, very surface level relationships. Lakshmi has deep, abiding relationships with people. And she's very introverted. She's deeply sort of introverted. And she doesn't talk much. She kind of prefers keeping to herself. Or to those, she doesn't enjoy social situations. I thrive in social situations. So, just sort of exact opposites of each other. So when we started working together, when we started Atta Galatta for the last 11 years, we kind of have been working with each other. There are points where we're the only 2 employees of Atta Galatta. So it's not like we even have others. And I think we found ourselves being very, very complementary to each other, right? We found ourselves being very, very complementary to each other. So, and also, there are sort of deep, I'd say, disagreements with the viewpoints of life because we just come from completely different perspectives, right? Like I said, the opposites of each other. But not just about being married, but even working with each other means that you tolerate and respect each other's point of view.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I want to paint the wall white, she might want to paint it yellow.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you can't end up with white and yellow stripes on the wall, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes, so we're very, very different people. We come from completely different perspectives. What we like to do, how we do things are completely the opposite of each other. But I think there's a lot of tolerance for each other's views. And there's a lot of tolerance for the way each of us sort of goes out and approaches
Gives
things.
space to each other as well, right?
I think just space is by far the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
I think space is by far you can't keep breathing down each other's necks.
Yeah.
And there are things that Lakshmi likes to do which I don't like to do. She'll go out and do those. There are things that I like to do and Lakshmi doesn't like to do, and I will do those. And there are things that we both like to do and we'll do those. And I mean that's basically how we've managed to, divide responsibilities. And when it comes to Atta Galatta, I think I haven't talked about this, but we've always wanted to be a little more than just a bookstore with books on the shelf, right? We said, let's not just put books on a shelf and hope that people will come and buy them, right? So we, from day one, encouraged, begged, requested people to come and use the space as a venue for artistic and literary interactions. So it manifests itself as events. So we do tons of events at Atta Galatta. It manifests as people that come and just hang out. So we actively encourage people to come and loiter at Atta Galatta, right? It results in people having, long conversations and chats with and getting to know. So we've basically over the last 11 years become a very large family. There are all of these people who've come and spent time with Atta Galatta, spent time with us, we've spent time with them, they've done events, they've hung out, they've used the space. And so in doing all of this, we end up doing tons of different things, right? So right from what is the kind of books we need to stock? I mean, obviously as a small indie bookstore, you're not going to be able to stock every book that's been published, right? So you say, okay, fine, I'm going to now create certain niches and specialties within Indian writing in English that I'll focus on and then go and curate my collection of books. If I'm going to get Marathi books, neither of us speak Marathi, or Bengali, neither of us speak Bengali. How are you going to go and curate? So, we play different roles when it comes to curation and selection of books that go onto the shelves. What kind of events do you want to have at Atta Galatta? What kind of artists and creators do you want to bring to Atta Galatta? We have completely different views on that. How do you go about and create, run these events and run these activities? We have completely different views on those. So we just, keep sort of arguing. We keep discussing. Sometimes she defers to what my opinion might be. There are other times when I defer to what her opinions might be. And, it's completely
it's a journey.
Just going down that path.
So for me, I remember I learned driving in the US from Shamir, and I thought that was a test of marriage. But
It sometimes is, huh?
I thought that was. But then when we started Badlo India together, I really realized working as a couple is a different ball game itself. And especially working on a brainchild of yours together as a couple is a true test of marriage, because everything comes out there because you're passionate and so am I passionate about it. Perspectives are different. Sometimes even objectives where you pivot can sort of wander around.
Pivoting is one of the worst times of,
Yes. And how you handle failure, for example, expectations on each one and what we bring to the table, and how you handle failure in that, because it's not just then work, one of the balls. You've got multiple balls invested on the same thing. How has failure been in this journey for you?
Oh, we've had more failure than success.
Shut
I think
up.
like with everything else. Yeah. We've had more failure than success, right? And I think what Lakshmi and I have practiced is she's been completely accepting of any failure that I have caused.
Wow.
Lakshmi's been completely accepting of any failure that I have caused. She has not once assigned blame, and she has not once sort of done whataboutery. What about and what if we've
I
done
told you
this
so.
or I told you so. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been able to sort of accept failure and move on to other things that you need to do once that failure is accomplished.
So it's probably one culture, if corporates were to draw a parallel, it's one culture that must be sort of leveraged, right?
I think it's a very, very. I think there are great companies in this world that do that and do that. They've institutionalized that, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're a company that is in creation of when you're into creating anything, right? When you're in the field of creating, either as an individual creator or as an organization that creates, or as a corporate that creates. I think that example of great companies that have institutionalized the process of accepting failure and not assigning blame are the ones that really have become the great creators of this world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I'm sure Edison did not invent the light bulb without exploding a few things.
Yeah.
And you know,
Yeah.
I think all great companies do that. I mean, look at our space program, right? Or NASA. You know, not every spaceship goes up and does what it's intended to do, right? Some of them just break up halfway and then fall into the sky. And nobody's sitting there saying, oh, you know what? That rocket cost you 100 crores and it exploded. Now I'm going to have your head for it.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're in the process, when you do that process of creation as a corporate as well, you know that there are certain things that are going to result in failure, and simply accepting failure as part of your process, right, without assigning blame, but maybe institutionalizing the learnings that caused that failure, or the learnings from that failure itself. I think there are many great companies in this world that have very strong processes and a very strong culture for accepting failure.
So I think last week or the week before, I was talking to a neurosurgeon, and I asked a similar question about failure. And for him, it was like every day, you don't know because it's a case.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
that's a great example.
Failure, and then next day I can't carry that emotion,
you can't carry the
because
success
it's a
forward.
new patient for me.
You neither can carry the success forward nor the failure forward,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
So true. That's a great example.
Yeah.
That is such a great example.
Yeah. For me, it was an eye-opener, because the way we look at failure is like, oh shit, it's such a deep thing. Whereas if you really change the perspective of failure to a learning experience, a journey, then it's a...
Unless the failure was caused by callous disregard for everything that one needs to do,
Yeah.
you cannot blame failure.
Yeah.
I think failure is a great lesson.
Yeah.
Failure is a great opportunity to, succeed. And I think I'm going to carry this example of this neurosurgeon. Right?
Yeah, that was an
Because
eye-opener.
you can't even carry your success forward.
Exactly.
Oh, I had a great brain surgery, so tomorrow I'm going to save that patient.
Yes.
No, you can't even carry the success forward.
Yeah.
Leave alone the failure, right?
Yeah.
Wow,
Just
that's
an
a great
eye-opener
example.
for
Yeah,
me.
that is a great example.
So that's what I like about these conversations, right? And that's life, right? You sort of take snippets from different aspects, and that sort of gets engraved in to connect the dots for us, right? So
I think I'm a little envious of you and this new path that you're exploring.
I'm loving
right?
it. I'm loving this journey.
I think having conversations with people is one of the most fulfilling things one can do.
Yeah.
There's just so many people in this world who've doing so many different things.
Yeah.
We haven't even scratched the surface to understand.
Yeah, very true. Very true. So I have one... when Shamir and I came to Atta Galatta, we've come to quite a few of the events. But I think the first one that really stood out for us was this Sufi dervish experience you had in the rooftop.
Oh yeah, with the Sufi music and that dastangoi and things like that.
Yes. And I remember coming out of that and telling Shamir, while this place is awesome and the experience has been awesome, you had that Koramangala house where the space was, and it was so beautiful. Changing from there to the JNC campus or the Koramangala new campus, how is it? Like, what did you go through emotionally? Because that was your child, right?
So when we started Atta Galatta, we decided, okay, listen, we have this house in Koramangala, and you've been to this house not as Atta Galatta, but just as dinner and friends and things like that, right? So when we started Atta Galatta, our first instinct was, we've got this house in Koramangala, let's just sort of redo it a little bit and create a public space out of it, right? So, and this is again about throwing yourself into whatever we were doing.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, let's go and remodel that house a little bit. And we ended up pulling it down. We didn't pull it down also completely. We ended up pulling like 50% of it down and then rebuilding it.
Yes.
Which was even harder than pulling it down. And that place just,
was magical.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. Again, the power of creators, right? architecture, design. They're all just such phenomenal
Yeah.
talents. So we had a beautiful place, but unfortunately, that space did not work out for a variety of reasons. We very quickly outgrew it, and we had a couple of other issues as well. And so we were actually forced to move out of that place, and that's when we found this other space in Koramangala near Jyotinivas College and moved into that. So we left a little piece of our heart behind, okay? And that's always hard. When you leave a little piece of your heart behind, it aches. That heartache, still is there. And we were in that space exactly for a year. We were in that space exactly for a year before we had to move out. And and that hurt. And it still hurts. And now we're going to make our next move, where we're going to move out of Koramangala into a space in Indranagar.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. And this hurts as well, because this time we've had to do it because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right? We were forced to sort of shut the physical space down and not see people and, get excited about coming to Church Street after 6 months just because, it hadn't happened in such a long time. So, yeah, that was a painful episode. That was a little piece of your heart, one left behind. And it aches, it hurts. But you move on, right?
Yeah.
You're like, fine.
It's also about dealing with these kind of ambiguities, right?
Absolutely.
And then still staying put on it. And that's the whole journey. I mean, most organizations go through it, but entrepreneurs especially and creators go through it even more, because there's
it's the same thing, right? I mean, I think it's so true. And you go through it as individuals, you go through it as organizations. And I think, like we spoke about earlier, if you're in the creative field, then what happens is those failures become like a reflection of you as a person. Not that I'm a creator, not being, but if you're looking at it as a, let's say you're a filmmaker and your magnum opus is a box office dud.
Yes.
I mean, imagine what they're going through.
Yeah. I dread this because I'm passionately creating podcasts, session after session. I really don't know how it's going to be when it's out there. If it tanks, then what?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're putting yourself out there, and what you're doing is a sort of a piece of your heart that you're actually leaving behind. And what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
You tend to think of it, right? I mean, people make music and say, some critic comes and pans it and says, this is the worst piece of, dog turd I've heard. Imagine the sort of emotion, the range of emotion the creator is going through.
Yeah.
But it's not like they stop music.
Yeah.
Come back and do the same thing.
Yeah.
Happens in every creative endeavor.
New perspectives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. So, one last question. Okay, actually two. Has Subodh changed from the corporate Subodh to the new Subodh?
Subodh lost all his hair.
Very visibly. Saujanya is all great.
Yeah. No. The corporate Subodh to Subodh that runs Atta Galatta, I think I've deeply, deeply changed. I have deeply changed. And I think, when I was in the corporate world, what seemed to be more important and therefore what you prioritize are completely different from what I prioritize right now. If I have a work call and my niece comes home, I'll lie. I'll tell them, boss, I'm in a meeting. And I'll play with my niece now.
The 5 balls.
Right?
Yeah.
For me, it's important to play. And my niece might be doing something as crazy as showing me, how to wash her Barbie's hair. To me, I think today it's become far more important than, a work call.
That was a game changer for me, because I remember one day Adya coming and telling me, so when Adya plays with me or we have our art time, if I'm busy, I tell her I'm busy. But otherwise, if I've given I'm with her, it's like 100% thing. And I never thought the child noticed it. She was much smaller, younger then. One day she comes and says, "You're very different from the other mothers, you know." I said, "How so?" And she said, "The other mothers engage with the child in their chores. Whereas you, when you engage with me, you're with me. There's no chores. It's us." And it never, it was like a amazing thing to hear from a child. Oh, then you want to do more of that. You want to spend more time around
and
that.
that's an opinion, that's feedback that came with no filters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And another thing, I think after I stopped my corporate career and I started Atta Galatta, I've stopped telling people I don't have time.
Very interesting.
I'm very proud, and I might not be lying. In the past few years, I have not told anybody I don't have time.
So you're rich with currency, with time as a currency.
Because I think now I've just changed the way, right? I say, you know what, I can't do it right now. Can we do it at a little later?
Yeah.
I have time.
Yeah.
I have time for everybody, for everything, and I have time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think in the corporate career, you always went through life telling people, "Boss, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
I don't have time for this."
Yeah.
You have something? "Oh, I don't have time for this."
Yeah. I have time.
I have time. I have plenty of time.
One more question. Advice to someone who is really getting into this creator or passion economy.
Think of it not just as a creator or a passion economy, but your way of life. Right? That's your way of life. Just like how, we talked about this earlier. It's like how you put on that dress in the morning and say, "You know what? I'm now going to go to Microsoft and I'm going to go and sell enterprise software to customers."
Yeah.
It's a way of life.
Yeah.
That is your way of life. That's what you've chosen to do. And I think taking that first plunge and saying, "You know what if I fail? What if it doesn't work out?" is natural. It's not just when you start off, it's going to be every day of your life. But I think creators are uniquely positioned by virtue of having that creative bent of mind to go out and actually circumvent and solve some of these roadblocks that might occur. The non-creative types don't have that choice. They have to depend on corporate structure and HR to take care of it.
Yeah.
But if you're creative, by definition of being creative, you have the ability to go out and circumvent and solve some of these issues that come to your life.
Yeah.
So I think I am constantly amazed at how creative people are, the way they create. And I think I've been blessed that, the last 10 years I've basically hung out with creative people every day of my life. And I think, these guys are the best in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Subodh, thank you so much. What a lovely conversation I had with you. I hope you also enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
Saujanya. Thank you so much, and thank you for thinking about me, and I wish you luck in your podcasting career.
Thank you.
And I wish that, I listen to hundreds of your episodes in the future.
Thank you. Keeping fingers crossed.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.